Bill Ullman, I am excited to have you on this show. You and I have exchanged a numerous times. You were the head of the USPA, the US Paddle Association. You also went to this crummy school called Princeton, where you played squash. And you have, like me, quite the obsession with paddle. But in your own words, start with who is Bill Ullman?
Well, I guess I would have to start these days with Bill Ullman as a paddle addict. And everything else has sort of become a little bit secondary in my life. I did play tennis and squash growing up in high school and college, and was lucky enough to play squash at a pretty high level in college. And then since then, have continued with my squash career, not my real career, which has been financial services for my whole life. But I compete in squash, mostly in squash doubles, and I've been lucky enough to win a couple national, I think five national doubles, age group doubles titles in the U.S.,
Congratulations.
three in three in Canada. But then about 6 years ago, maybe pre-COVID, a couple years pre-COVID, I was introduced to the sport of paddle in the Bahamas of all places. And I got kind of hooked on it, but I couldn't do anything about it because when I came home, there were no courts around. I watched videos on YouTube of all these amazing points. And then, luckily enough, a guy named Santi Gomez opened Paddle House in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, not far from where I live. And I was biking there every day, waiting for the club to open. And when it finally opened, I was playing there as much as I could. And then he opened up another paddle house even closer to my apartment. In fact, it's 172 steps away from my apartment I'm
But who's
living with.
counting, right?
And yeah, but who's counting? And so I can be found there pretty often, and it's really been for someone at my age, over 60 now, an incredible joy to learn a new sport, to try to get better at something, and something I think I can continue to get better at, and to meet all of the incredible passionate players, not only in the United States, but now in England and Latin America. It's really been a burst of energy and passion in my life in the last several years. So that's been great.
I love it.
I'm a
And
financial services professional. I'm married. I have twin girls, twin daughters that are 30 years old, and I'm a New Yorker.
love it. Well, going back to the Bahamas moment, I'm just wondering, you come on to you see this sort of weird court, you go into it, and you're like, well, I got this because I'm a squash player. How did that go?
Well, I was on a kind of a guys golf and tennis trip, and all the people that were on the trip were kind of competitive, obnoxious, fun, friendly tennis players, and not such good golfers, at least most of us. But our friend who's was a member of this club where the court was, said we all kind of looked at this glass box and said, what the hell is that? There's tennis balls inside the court, but we don't really understand what's going on here. And he said, oh, come, let's go try it. And we all of us got on the court, and all of us figured we could master this game instantly. And of course you can't. But we all did have an aptitude for it, and we could keep the ball in play. There was excitement when you could play it off the wall, either the side wall or the back wall, or hit it into the wall and back over the net. So we were kind of learning as we were going over that course of the weekend. But like I said, it was like a tease. It was a little taste of the sport, and then I didn't really get to do it for a long time or play it again for a long time. So, but in that short, brief moment, it was sort of like love at first sight.
It wasn't Lightford Key, was it?
No, it was nearby. It was a place called Albany Club.
Or I know it. I tried to go organize something at that place, but all right. So the fact is that squash players, like tennis players, come to this sport with a certain privilege, knowledge of walls, knowledge
Yep.
of volleys, and one of the things that is always of interest is the rewiring component. I most of the people I have on this podcast are generally coming into paddle from tennis, if they're not pure players.
Right.
But what is it that makes what's the hardest part for a squash player to wire or rewire into the paddle game? Because it's not the wall.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like I guess I put it slightly differently, or I, tennis players come with the natural advantage of loving to come to net and volley, and that is the essence of paddle, is taking over the net, controlling the point from the net as a team. Um, in in squash, the volleys are often swings, more full swings, and that doesn't work in paddle. You are almost inevitably late when you do that. And when you're late, the ball goes into the fence. So into the wall and it's out. So the tennis part of me, and I grew up playing tennis as well. The tennis part of me loves the volleys and loves coming to net. The squash part of me is comfortable, but you have to learn the patterns off the wall and the spins off the wall, but is comfortable playing the ball off the wall and very occasionally maybe a boast kind of shot into the sidewall and across the front of the net. So I think both games bring different advantages and weaknesses. Like the squash volley doesn't work. And the tennis overhead doesn't work, and topspin doesn't work. And we've all grown up in the tennis world in the last 30 years to hit topspin as we've watched Rafa Nadal perfect that style of play. But as you know, too much topspin, the ball bounces high off the back wall, and then you have an easy shot. So each game brings something advantageous, but also some disadvantages too. And you have to temper that and kind of learn to manage that when you convert to paddle.
Speaking in the weeds, as I played a lot of squash as well, similar to tennis, the desire to take the tee. That's where it happens in squash. The net is
Yes.
where it happens in tennis, if you will. And therefore I feel like that urge to take the tee is something that needs to be unwired. So you feel comfortable just sitting back there, wait for your moment, drive, pop up a few lobs, stay in the back, just cool. And now we transition.
Right. No, it's the patterns are very different. The in squash, you can often muscle your way into a point by just hitting hard. That doesn't work in paddle. Hitting hard is not necessarily the answer. Usually it's in fact a Chiquita or a really good lob that gets you back into the point. So it's a soft shot that gets you back in, not a drive. A drive can often cut off time and allow the team at the net to step in and hit a very decisive volley. So the patterns are different. It's like everything, each game has its own techniques and strategies, and you've got to learn that in paddle, and you've got to break, some tennis habits or some squash habits to get good at paddle.
All right. And then you said you won a number of doubles tournaments in squash. You've also done well in paddle. Talk us through the difference in the teamwork, the pair.
Mm, that's really interesting. I think what's happened to me in squash doubles is I've actually become a better communicator during the point with my partner because in paddle, it's a very vocal sport when you're playing. You're always kind of announcing to your partner, they're both up, they're coming up, deuce court's back, or whatever the language that you're using is, but it's extremely vocal, and you're taught from the beginning to say it out loud, say it loudly, make sure your partner knows what's going on because they're focused on retrieving the lob. They're looking at the ball. They're not looking at what the other team is doing. That you're the eyes as as a partner. So, and I find myself now on the squash court telling my partners like where to hit it and what to do and who's where. Not always going over so well because squash is a kind of a quieter, in some ways, a quieter game. You don't hear a lot of that talking, and I think I've brought the talking into the squash. So it's a different kind of partnership that goes on. When in squash doubles, I've found that I've played consistently with, a handful of people over the years. We kind of know each other's movements instinctively. We don't have to talk, but it's better to talk, actually. It's better to reinforce it and make sure people know what's going on. And so maybe it's helped in that aspect. The paddles sort of influenced the squash a little bit. The squash communication, it's much quieter than in paddle.
Well, the other thing, of course, is that all four of you in the same zone, right?
Yes.
And the idea of sort of talking between points secretly about, well, this time let's hit down the line more.
Yeah.
They're right there
Yeah,
to
it's a little more
excite you.
intrusive. That's true. And it can be for sure. It's definitely um, a more cramped space to play in.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot less tolerance of, sweating off in between points as opposed to the 20 seconds you get in a paddle
Right.
game. What about in tennis? Like, what's your observation with regard to lawn tennis doubles versus paddle doubles?
Um, my tennis has fallen off, I would say, in the last decade. Um,
I mean, the last 6 years.
yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, more relevant, but it's just, I don't know, in tennis, if you're playing competitively, maybe when you're serving, your partner net's giving you a little hand signal, serve up the middle or serve out wide, so they're ready for that. Um, there's, I found in tennis doubles, I guess on the poaching side of things, it's often a surprise when you cross over to poach a ball. It's a surprise to your partner. Whereas in paddle, it's kind of well known that whoever has the dominant forehand in the middle of the court. So if it's two righties playing, it's the player playing on the left side on the ad court who's going to hit 60% of the balls, right? Or maybe even more, and is going to cross over in the middle to take the forehand volley. Backhand volleys, for a variety of reasons in paddle, are a weaker shot, and you want to avoid that if someone can hit a forehand volley. So I think in a way that it's not really a poach because they're not totally crossing over on the side, but you kind of know that, okay, that's the forehand person's ball and they're going to take it. Whereas in tennis, it's a little bit more of a surprise to me when my partner cuts across the court at the last
Well,
moment.
just to your point about the 60%, I was looking at the statistics from Paddle Intelligence, and actually it's 52% of balls are taken by the left-handed player. That also may be diminished because of left-handed players, right? Because if they're left-handed playing on the right, they will
Yeah,
take a lot of
then
shots.
it's more even, right?
But
But
the
if
overall statistic is 52-48.
oh wow, that's
Yeah.
closer than I would have given it credit for.
And that's why it stood up for me. So Bill, not only are you a great player at paddle, you're also head of the USPA. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, I my journey in paddle at the sort of the governance side of the game began really when I joined one of the committees. I had played for the United States in the Pan American Senior Games in 2022. And as a result of that experience, which I really loved, net, I loved it, but I also saw there was so much more we could be doing as a US organization around the event. And so I joined the US teams committee. And there was nothing to it. You just said, I'd like to join this committee. And there were a series of calls that we had with the board member who ran that part of the USPA, the National Teams Committee. And another friend of mine named Ron Bobman and I were both on that committee after having played in Argentina for the first time and having the experience we had. And I think we added a lot of value to the committee. We both were able to bring in some sponsorships based on our professional lives, which really added to the team's overall experience because we had a little bit more money behind the team. And I think we helped out with just general organizational matters. And then at the end of that year of serving on the committee, there was a notice to the membership saying, if you'd like to run for the board of the USPA, put your name in the hat and run. And I put my name in, and so did Ron. And somehow the membership voted. I got enough votes. It wasn't really like a campaign thing or anything. I just, I'm at a point in my life where whether it's my condominium association or paddle or other organizations, I like to get involved and I like to try to be helpful. And this was something I was certainly passionate about as a sport to play. And so I ran and got elected. And then last year, Martin Sweeney, who was the president when I joined the board, he rolled off, and the board decided to make me president, for better or worse. So that was their choice. I take no credit or responsibility for that decision. So here I am, president of the USPA. And honestly, the way I look at the whole thing is very much like my work in the startup world. I have had the opportunity in the last 20 years to work with a lot of startup companies as an advisor and an investor, a consultant, and an operating executive. And paddle in the United States is a startup right now. I like to describe it as it's kind of where tennis was in 1910. We're just at the beginning of a very long and hopefully fruitful journey of growth in this sport, both in terms of players, in terms of courts, in terms of clubs, in terms of tournaments, in terms of quality of play, in terms of accessibility for people to play. There are so many aspects of it, but it's everything right now is kind of going up and to the right, which, as a startup person, you want those charts. And that's where we are. Our membership is growing. Our number of tournaments is growing. Our quality of players is incredible and improving every year. We're not close. We're not close to Spain and Argentina. We're not even in the ballpark yet. So we're just at the beginning of this whole thing, and it's been really fun to be a part of it. And I just hope I'm contributing, honestly. I hope I'm trying to get the organization ready for what's to come.
I want to talk a little bit more about the US, but before that, the thought that came to my mind is US rugby. My two cousins played for the US team, and or even football, soccer, US soccer, great team, but never do I feel that US rugby or US football is going to compete with Germany or France or Italy or Argentina for that matter. And in paddle, I mean, we're just right now going through the Euros. I mean, it's Spain and the rest. It just feels like their dominion, the Argentinians with the men and Spain with the men and the women in particular. It just feels like that's going to be a very hard
Absolutely.
round to knock off. I mean, how many years do you think, Bill, in your eyes, before we can have other
Well,
countries
I
legitimate?
think we're talking decades, not years, to be truly competitive at multiple levels and with men and with women. It's going to take a long time. We don't really, in the United States right now, we don't really have junior programs, junior academies, junior camps, all the stuff that that goes into the tennis infrastructure, the tennis world that we've had for decades here. Um, you know, if you look at there's no reason the U.S. can't eventually catch up, right? We're a big country, 330 million people. We have great rackets traditions in the United States with tennis and squash, and now pickleball and formerly racquetball, and people like to play racket sports in the United States. So I think we'll get the popularity, but the question is, you really need juniors and a lot of juniors to be playing and competing and getting good at the game so that when they get to their late teens, early 20s, they're able to compete with the best in the world. And that's just going to take time. It's just, we don't have the numbers yet. It's not a college sport. The US, sports in the US kind of revolve around the whole college recruitment cycle. And so if a sport being is not a college recruitment sport, then it's going to be hard you have to convince parents to pay for lessons, pay for camps, pay for training. What's the upside, for that?
Well, it's
Um,
funny you say that. My niece Skylar is at UVA, and she wants to start the paddle club at UVA. I was contacted by a young man at Yale, and
yeah,
so I know that it's in there. But the thing that I want to come back to is this rugby story, because in New Zealand, I have maybe 3 million people. They're kind of good at rugby, so it's not about 350 million. And unlike tennis, the real issue is for me that in paddle there's a specific culture of the game, and as Sanjo says, it's an individual sport played by two people, and that particularity, the patience, the idea of not going gung ho and hit everything fast and hard first time, the build up. I mean, like in football, like in rugby, there's a lot of build up, and it's not all about the score. Like
right.
basketball, which is all about hoop, 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 hoop. In rugby, you can have 30 phases before we even score. In football, you can have nil-nil, like in cricket. In paddle, I'm just wondering how are we going to help not just get good technically, but absorb that culture. And I think the US has some
Well,
strong suits
here's
in
what I
that.
would say. Like, I think the if you go to Miami in the United States, the paddle culture is extraordinarily strong, and it's infused with Latin American and European Spaniards, all all the influence.
Arturo Coelho.
Yeah, I think all the influences you would want to have to create an environment where excellence can be achieved. I think we have that already in Miami. But again, it's just going to take time. You, it's great that I want to play and a 32-year-old wants to play. We're never going to be the best in the world. We're not even going to be close. You have to be that 12-year-old that's learning absorbing that culture and what the strategies and the DNA of the sport into their bodies and into their play to achieve that greatness. And that I just think that's going to take time to happen. But there's no reason it can't happen in the United States. We have a lot of communities growing and developing, and I think the junior stuff will come. Again, it's money, it's time, it's awareness of the sport. I bet 97% of the United States of America has never heard of paddle, has never seen a court, doesn't know what it is, doesn't really care, and that's fine. But tennis started there too, and now there's probably not an American that doesn't know what tennis is. They may not have played it, they may not like it, but they know what it is. And there's courts all over the country at high schools and play parks and playgrounds and schools and clubs. So it's accessible. Paddle's not there. We're not even close to that yet.
Well, plus in the United States, we also have this other P game, that has taken a
Pickleball.
far, yeah,
Yes,
much bigger place than it has the rest of the world. And I wonder to what
correct.
extent you believe that's a bonus or a handicap for paddle?
Uh, I think I guess I'm just a believer that everything has to stand on its own and have merit and a reason to exist. And if it does, people will come to it and play. I think um, pickleballers will gravitate to paddle. Maybe some will. I think tennis players and squash players are more likely to find an affinity with the game than with pickleball. But again, it's another group of people who are out there doing something with a paddle, with a racket, with a ball. It may be adjacent, where they play, may be adjacent to paddle courts, so they may get exposure to the game that way. So, I don't think it hurts, but I'm not sure it's the same group of people that are playing. I just don't know. I don't know enough to know.
All right. So one last question about the US, and that is with regard to the growth. What is it that's going to help it tip over? Do you believe it's going to be a president playing paddle, or some American football star playing
But we,
football paddle
well, we've certainly I think we've had a bunch of the celebrity stuff going on now for a while. Like Eva Longoria is involved, which is amazing,
with the Hexagon Cup?
and we've got Wayne Boych in Miami does an amazing job with the Reserve Cup, and he brings in a lot of celebrities for that, and it's an amazing event. Um, so I think we've had some of that, which is I think helpful. Um, and it certainly brings eyeballs on the sport. I'm more, from the USPA's point of view, I'm more concerned with membership and people playing and growth. And, the number of USPA tournaments in the last year tripled. We have three times as many. I think we've done 170 tournaments so far this year across the United States. We've done just amazingly. It's only the second year of the US Open Paddle Championships in the United States. Our prize money went up over double from one year to the next, from our first year to the second year. It's going to go up again next year. The quality of play was unbelievable this year versus even last year was great too. Don't get me wrong, but we had so many great teams and players playing. So I think it's like this, there's a lot of things that have to happen all at the same time to build the momentum. I'm not sure I believe in this tipping point where it's all going to happen because courts take a while to build, zoning, permits, clubs, financing, communities developing, like that all takes time. You don't just wave a wand and it happens. And it takes a lot of hard work and a lot of entrepreneurship and a lot of foresight. So I feel like we need to have club owners making money and continuing to grow the club side. We need those courts to be developed. We need the juniors to come into the game. We need the US Open to continue to grow and get bigger and get more attention. We need events like what we just did, the Anglo-American thing that you and I are both involved in. All of that. It's like a combination of all of these things that are happening in the sport create the momentum and create the environment for continued and sustained growth. And by the way, I'm just as a business person, I'd say I'm much more interested in quality, sustainable growth than rapid growth that then falls off a cliff. So, let's see how the market will determine all of this. But I feel like we have to do a lot of things pretty well to keep this whole thing going, as opposed to like one thing happening.
So I have two observations. One is with regard to coaches. The fact that the United States has a very strong Hispanophone culture and communities means that you can grab great Spanish coaches, even though they may not speak English, which is a problem. Or in France, you don't get the quality coaching, and the paddle MBA that Marcus has been doing. Obviously, that also has to be a big part. And then the Pro Paddle League, the PPL.
Yep.
To what extent is that part of the USPA? Is that sort of
It's a separate organization. It's complete, that's a professional league, if you will, where there's teams and ownership of those teams. We speak to them regularly, which is great. They've been very supportive of the USPA, and the USPA is very supportive of PPL. We'd like to obviously see more USPA top-ranked players involved in some of their events and on their teams. I don't know, but again, I don't know quite how to do that because they're not ranked as highly as the players that they have on those teams. So how do you
Well,
get
because they are not playing in the FIP tournaments enough, and
right? And
it's
well, then they're
hard.
not good enough. They're not there yet at the level that Tapia and these great players are at. So, but it's we're getting there. We did an event out. We participated in an event with them in the Hamptons over the summer. They had a court in a vineyard. It was beautiful, and they invited very kindly some USPA top-ranked USPA players to be involved in a kind of a exhibition match as part of the PPL's thing. That's great. I mean, because that raises the level of the USPA and it becomes more relatable to all the spectators. The spectators in the United States are not going to know who Tapia is or Coelho or Galan or LeBron. I mean, or Gematria or whatever. They just don't know those names. It just doesn't mean anything to people yet, unless you're in this small paddle community. But having a friend who's an American who's a top-ranked player, maybe that brings a little bit more interest into what's going on. So we'll see. But we'd love to. I'm very supportive. There's no tension between the two organizations. They're not mutually. They're hopefully mutually beneficial to each other.
Yeah, I surely hope so. I mean, the fact is, the United States is a land of opportunity for paddle players, and the fact that Arturo Coelho has established himself in Miami
Yeah.
and learning English, it's all going to be good.
Yeah.
Last area of conversation I wanted to record with you, Bill, the Anglo-American Cup. So you and Ben Nichols
We
and
both win.
indeed, the three, Joel, you all three came up with this idea of founding the Anglo-American Cup. And was it over a glass of whiskey? Was it over a sangria on a paddle court? How on earth did you sort of conjure this up? What was the spark that started this idea of putting us together?
I for better or worse, I'll take some of the credit for the original idea, but it was just in my head. And I ran into Ben at a paddle event in the Hamptons, summer of 2024, I guess. And I said to Ben, this is a no-brainer. Our countries, the two of us, I mean, I think about this, where we are in the sport, because of my USPA role and having traveled around the world a little bit now to play and knowing how far behind we are all these other countries. But the UK and the US, in all honesty, are kind of like in the beginning of paddle journeys as a sport in these two countries for
100%.
whatever reasons, but that's where we are. You have maybe more courts than we do. You're a smaller country, but you're closer to Spain. We're a bigger country, but we're further from Argentina. You know, and we've had a great community in Miami for a while, but it's really only been in the last 5, 10 years that the whole thing's sort of taken off here. So I said to Ben, like, do you think we could pull off a US, like a Ryder Cup of paddle, a US versus UK event? And he instantly said, "Oh, that's a great idea." Now he's a PR guy, so maybe everything's great that is paddle related. That's his role. But and then we brought Joel in because we needed help on the corporate side, the sponsorship side of things, and someone to handle all of that because I know nothing about any of that. So, but I have participated in the past in international sporting competitions. There's a thing in squash doubles, in fact, called the Can-Am Cup, and it's Canada versus the United States. And one of the aspects of that that I loved, and I continue to love, is that it's multi-generational. It's not only the best players. We have, there's the top category, but then there's also age group play. And then the whole thing kind of adds up to, in a point system, to who wins the Can-Am Cup. And it's a very meritocratic um, selection process. And we knew in our first year we'd have to make accommodations. We couldn't be purely based on ranking because people are traveling and this and that. But we're hopeful over time there's more merit base in the selection criteria, and that we continue to have this sense of community. One of the things I really love about paddle is the community aspect of it. I play with younger people, I play with older people, I play with women, I play with men, I play with people who have similar backgrounds, who have different backgrounds. We're all bound by paddle, and we all agreed we wanted an event that reflected that community as well. And hopefully you felt it a little bit in the format that we established, but that's how it all kind of came together. And then it was just hard, frankly, it's just a lot of work organizing anything, getting 32 Americans to fly to London for something, and then getting 32 Brits to go to a club in North London. That's not
All
so
that
easy to
in
do.
just
And it
over,
costs money and time and everything.
and you did it all in just 1 year.
Yeah, we did it in about 15 months. And we had some fits and starts. I think initially we were going to be in the US, then we moved it. We had some issues. So, like it's just, nothing's a straight line in life. And, you kind of have to roll with the punches, but we persevered, and I think we pulled off something pretty fun.
Oh, well, certainly for having participated in it, Bill, I thought it was a remarkably fun experience. And I loved the fact that we had not just ages, but the different mixed doubles, the involvement of various people, influencers on the side, and jazzing it up
Yeah.
in the media, Pulco with the clothing. It was really cool.
Yeah. The other aspect, of what we were trying to accomplish. I'm losing my train of thought, but the sense of community was great, but also the sense of history of the United States and the UK. There's always been this, we've had a great history, regular political history, but there's also been a sporting history tradition between the two countries. And we wanted to play into that theme as well. And that kind of makes it, there's a lot of elements that made it kind of a fun, interesting competition. Beginning of the paddle journeys, the history of the two countries, the community aspect, all of that, men and women, including the mix, the community stuff, all of that kind of blended together nicely, I thought.
A little bit the irony is, of course, I have a US passport as well as a British one.
Yeah. Well,
So,
we may have had somebody on our team too. Lisa Tier may have qualified for both as well.
and on top of that, I had to participate in that 47th rubber against Tom and Ron, where we
Yeah.
got well and truly doused. But it was a remarkable ambiance. I want to congratulate you, Bill, for what you're
Thank
doing
you.
at the USPA, for putting that together with Ben. That was just a lovely event. And I send people to where they can go find some more about the USPA and you, if you wish, Bill Ullman.
Yeah, you can go to palusa.com. You can go to my LinkedIn page if you're really that interested in me. Not that exciting, but and I'm reachable on WhatsApp and Instagram, BillU63. I don't post very much, but I'm public, so you can reach me there. But yeah, and I mean, I'm excited for next year's version of the Anglo-American Cup. I'm excited for the growth in the UK, so that when I come and visit, there'll be more opportunities to play, more places to play. I thought the club that we were at in Whetstone, the Paddle Hub, was outstanding. Beautiful high ceilings, which, as you know, makes a big difference for indoor clubs. And I thought the level of play, particularly, I was so enamored by the open men and women players. I thought the matches were outstanding, both sides. I mean, it was a joy to watch, really.
Vamos paddle, Bill. Thank you very much for being on the show, and we'll
Oh,
be
it's
in
my
touch soon.
pleasure. Absolutely, Mentor. Thank you very much.